chance to ask the questions. So,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. If you allow me, I'll just, as a prelude, mention a few things in the beginning, maybe to set the tone. One thing that I would want to mention is an understanding and a clarification which every Muslim ought to know, and that is, no matter what you do in religion, what you understand in religion, the beliefs that we have, the practices that we have been asked to follow, ibadat and all rituals, they all have one target, which is tazkiyah, purification. Purification, tazkiyah primarily is comprised of two components. One is purification and the other is progress, development. These are two interrelated, call them phenomena. God Almighty has created all humans with a tremendous potential to make progress, moral as well as spiritual. When I say moral progress, what I mean is our relationship with others, the way we conduct ourselves vis-a-vis others. All humans have been given this potential that they are born with. And likewise, we have come here with a potential to come close to God more and more, which is called spirituality. However, what has happened is that because this life was meant to be a test, we were set free and were made free. We were given liberty, freedom, and there was evil around us which was attractive. So the life that we are leading is glamorous, is attractive. We know what is right from what is wrong. The difficulty, the challenge is that what is wrong is quite often attractive, and it draws you towards it, and you get gratification, immediate results in the form of excitement, etc. What is good is quite often challenging, demanding, demands sacrifice and focus, concentration. Religion helps us in overcoming evil, the threat that we are confronted with because of our inclination towards what is bad, what is evil. And when we are able to overcome that difficulty to a higher or lesser degree, we are able to realize our inner potential of progress, development in morality as well as in spirituality. No matter what we believe in religion, no matter what we practice in religion, the ultimate goal is tazkiyah. The more we understand religion properly, the more we practice it properly, we are purified from inside on the one hand, both morally and spiritually, and then we make progress. We make progress, why? Because that's how we have been designed. So the reason why we do not at times or on many occasions realize our hidden potential is that there are obstacles, challenges in the form of evil, our own ego, our desires. The moment that challenge is overcome, the inner potential is realized. It is as if, there is an engine of a vehicle which has a tremendous potential to move very fast, but there are brakes which are preventing it from realizing its potential. You remove the brakes and it would run in full speed. And this tazkiyah, the Quran declares, is the only condition of eligibility to enter the paradise. The Quran is absolutely clear. Number one, that the real success is the success of the next life. And number two, that success will only be achieved if we will have done our tazkiyah to the minimum level that the Almighty expects us to go through. That is point number one. Point number two that I want to mention before we start this session. The Almighty has had the policy of sending His messengers, prophets from time to time to basically give this message. This life is a trial, the next life is a real life, and in order for you to succeed in the next life, you've got to go through the process of understanding and following religion, which will enable you to achieve tazkiyah. The Almighty in His supreme wisdom, and if you'll ask, I'll let you know my understanding why He did it, but He decided that ultimately Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be the last prophet, the last messenger, and therefore after him no further prophets would come to give God's message to humanity directly. Therefore, this message that He brought was ensured to be preserved fully. This decision was not taken regarding the earlier messages because there were prophets coming and the process never stopped. However, when a decision was taken that there are not going to be any prophets coming anymore, it had to be decided that the message the last messenger brought is to be fully preserved. This decision of preserving God's message was done in a way that the message was ensured to be unanimously agreed upon by the entire first generation of Muslims, the companions of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. They all agreed. There was unanimity. And that unanimity about the message was then transmitted in a manner that there was no interruption, uninterrupted continuity, ijma and tawatur. So, there is something that doesn't need to be explained in elaborate lectures. It was made very simple, clear and understandable. And this preservation of the message in its pristine form has been done in the two sources of Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran is a text which was preserved verbally by it being memorized and read in prayers. And every Muslim we know has to memorize some part of the Quran, and there are some gifted Muslims who memorize the entire Quran. This process has ensured that the book gets preserved. Likewise was done in the case of Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, he prayed Salat 5 times a day, and he was followed by, emulated by all Muslims. When he left this world, prayer and many other such practices continued uninterrupted, without any gaps, by all Muslims. And that Sunnah practices, which are quite apart from the Quran does refer to them, but they are independent of the Quran. They are also what we have gotten as an ummah in their pristine form. Why are there differences? Again, it's a matter you can discuss. There is a third source, which is a very natural source, which is the record of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, which was transmitted to the later generations by the people who observed the Prophet. He practiced religion. He was the model example of the best practices of religion. He explained religion. He answered the questions of people, and there were many events that took place during the lifetime of the Prophet, which is our glorious history. The best part of our history is what happened during his lifetime. It is not surprising that some Muslims, many but not all, observed some part of what he did and said, retained it, and transmitted to some people in the next generation. Quite understandable. I mean, it couldn't have been otherwise. However, unlike in the case of the Quran and Sunnah, which were arranged to be fully preserved, this information or reservoir of knowledge, it got transmitted naturally from individuals to individuals, until such time that in the beginning of the 3rd century Hijrah, there were some outstanding scholars, researchers who spent their lifetime to investigate and find out as to whether this information is reliable or not, and they came up with respective collection of books of hadith, and we have now a third source as well, which is in the form of hadith. This information is also a part of deen, but it's an explanation, it's clarification. The original core religion is fully preserved, and we have, call it a footnote of it, in the form of hadith as well. Because humans were involved in this process, there are differences, not just in understanding whether a certain narrative is reliable or not, but also in humans have spread across the entire world. God Almighty, it seems to me, in His supreme wisdom, arranged for this message to get across to those who are not as yet Muslims by Muslims living in majority, so that these Muslims should become their neighbors, their business partners, their teachers, their students, their patients, their doctors, etc. And by the conduct, by the behavior of Muslims, the non-Muslims also come to learn about Islam. Therefore, dear brothers, you accept it or not, you are the representatives of this message, and it is through you that others would come to learn about it. I'll go back to Pakistan, but you have very heavy responsibility on your shoulders. That's the last statement I want to make, and now I am available for your questions.
Thank you very much, sir.
Question answers.
So I'll open with the first question. So in your kind of initial statements, you talked about the essence of religion. So would you say there's a verse of Quran which kind of captures the essence of religion, presenting at the beginning?
You see, there are different verses. There is a verse which has been mentioned in the Quran 4 times, which does talk about it, but obviously the mention is in a way that it really needs to be explained. But I just refer to it if you've asked. It's, as I said, it's there in the Quran in 4 different passages, 4 different parts. But the one that I would refer to is Surah Jummah, Surah number 62, verse 2. هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. It is He, God, who sent His messenger with guidance and true religion. and sorry, I'm translating a different verse. Ba'atha fil ummiyina rasulam minhum. He sent amongst the unlettered ummi, the children of Ismail, a messenger from within them. What does he do? Yatlu alayhim ayatihi. He recites before them his verses. Wa yuzakkihim. And what happens? It causes them to be purified. Because tazkiyah is a much broader expression. Let me say it causes them to be tazkiyafied. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And how does it happen? Well, he teaches them the law, Sharia, al-Kitab, wal-Hikmah, as well as morals and beliefs. So this is one. But the Quran mentions over and over again, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. The one who has done his tazkiyah has succeeded. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The one who has done its tazkiyah, has purified it, has succeeded. And the one who has defiled it is doomed. So the Quran is absolutely clear about it, that when you are going through the process of understanding and following religion, the ultimate target and goal that you need to achieve is your tazkiyah. And it's really very important to understand and retain this point, this ultimate objective, because quite often it so happens that I am under misunderstanding that I am following religion, I'm talking about it, I'm practicing it, but the one thing that I'm not achieving is tazkiyah. I'm causing harm to others, I have wrong, bad thoughts, and so on. So my prayers, my fasting, my zakat is not helping me in achieving what was the ultimate objective. So that objective is extremely important to be right there before us, no matter whatever we do in the domain of religion.
So I have a question in regards to what you were the reality of it, but you can use a lot of things. How do you see that?
Again, you started off by mentioning something that was referring to the history of the manner the Quran was compiled. I would encourage you, and if we have copies of the book, which is based on the outstanding research done by one of our friends at Mawrid, Dr. Shahzad Salim, I think I would encourage you to go through it. The brief version of it probably should be the first thing that they should go through. आपके पास है सर उनकी वो ये किताब, right? So
it's a question that I raised.
Right.
And it's relating to something, because the 7 qira'at of the Quran.
Right.
And
Right.
theses have been written to prove it and to disprove it.
Right.
So it is confusing.
It is indeed.
Or can be confusing.
Right. But what I'm saying is that let's read about it more, and it's a very important area of investigation. Coming to your question, honestly, I think that there should be no one rigid way of learning that should be imposed and suggested to people. This tremendous progress that technology has enabled us to have at our disposal should be utilized to our advantage, to the advantage of this message as best as we can. Right now, when I'm talking to you, I have this gadget before me, which is enabling me, my presentation to be heard by many other people in different parts of the world, which is brilliant. And I think, again, my understanding, like you people are here in God's scheme to enable His message to get across to others, these new inventions are also helping in a big way. You know better than me that in the modern world, people are busy. They are doing different things because they need to earn. and the type of jobs people are doing require them, different people, to be able to learn for their betterment, worldly, secular knowledge as well as religious knowledge in different ways. The technology should be used effectively to our advantage. How should it be done? Well, leave it to the individual. Different people have different tastes. Some people would find it convenient and more effective for them to use smartphones, laptops. Others, I have seen during my lifetime the tremendous impact that, for instance, television has had, and this was probably 2 or 3 decades. Now I think it has been overtaken by the internet facilities, and you don't even know that a small talk that you made delivered in a small room was spread far and wide. We have now many scholars in Pakistan who really live in their own area, in their own small town, and delivering their lectures, but they are well known, renowned, highly respected and followed all over the globe. So I think we should celebrate this potential that we have now at our disposal. But the only thing that I would emphasize is, which unfortunately where we are going wrong, is that information, knowledge demands openness. I was just making a presentation this morning wherein we discussed 2 verses, both requiring believers to be fair and just. And I said that this justice and fair play is not just demanded from judges and from qadis. It is demanded from everyone. Every day, I and you, we go through different challenges wherein we have to take a decision, and we know that certain decisions are unfair and there are others which are fair. And this decision making also includes opinion formation. Your opinion that you form has to be fair. It can be unfair, it can be wrong if it's biased, if you are being unnecessarily judgmental, emotional. So what I'm saying is that use whatever form of technology or way of learning suits you, appeals to you. Let your children use whatever they think they feel comfortable with. But let everybody know that God expects from all of us, all humans, that they are honest in their learning. They are fair. And God doesn't expect from us anything impossible. What is the right opinion on a certain matter? Well, that is only God who knows it. My job is to do as best as I can, given my limitations, to know the truth. And for God's sake, please understand the reality that while I'm going to do it honestly, and you're also going to do it honestly, your views can be different from mine. I mean, views even on religion will not be identical. It was only possible when the Prophet, Allah's mercy be on him, was there. One would have a difference of opinion, one would go to him and he would say that this is what the right understanding is, and we would say, fine, done, surrender. Now we have issues, problems, which we try to understand in the light of God's religion, Quran, Sunnah, Hadith. We have scholars who give different opinions. Try as best as you can to form the right opinion, but whatever opinion you form, keep your mind open. Allow yourself the facility, the luxury to revisit and change your view as and when you find that a new point of view is making more sense. There is no other way out. It's scary that you come to learn about the fact that there are many Muslims who have formed an opinion about what religion is when they were 15, 16 years ago, 16 years old, simply because they liked somebody, some personality, and then thereafter they are staunchly, rigidly defending that view without ever bothering to listen to other views. That should not be the case. Technology, way of learning, use what you think is more effective, more suited to your temperament and your limitations, your environment.
Thank you, sir. Please.
I'm a student of history. If you look at history, Islam is spread on the strength of our character, Muslim characters, not the strength of power. Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before the Prophet was revealed to him, was known as Sadiq and Amin. And I think in history you will not find anyone with a better character than him. Now, if I bring it to the contemporary situation and raise the Qadiani issue, they fall off the requirement to be Muslim. There's no doubt about it. There's no two ways about it. So they are therefore not Muslim. But should we deny them the right to be an equal citizen of Pakistan?
You see, no matter what we do as individuals or as nations, let's not forget that God is judging us on the basis of the principles that He has given us to follow. We have decided in our constitution that all citizens of Pakistan shall be equal, and that's how it should be. If you ask me, ideally, in principle, there should be no restriction on anyone to hold an office if the individual is qualified, capable, and eligible. That's my basic answer. However, there is something called pragmatism. Unfortunately, in our country, the emotions are so high, hatred against this community is so strong that it is simply not possible that you give a position of prominence to somebody who belongs to the Ahmadi community. A few words about it. We do not agree with what they believe in. We think that their understanding is flawed. It needs to be corrected. Personally, honestly, at a personal level, I would like to get the opportunity of communicating with Ahmadis, at least those who are open-minded, to tell them that, look here, your point of view is very weak and this is the correct point of view. But in the process, obviously, I will give them a right for them to influence me. However, the brief history of Pakistan, the way it has emerged, there's many things that have happened, and there have been errors and blunders that have been committed on both sides, which have caused the atmosphere to become what it is right now. So, you know, the ideal conduct approach is what I've already answered, but I think the practical, pragmatic approach should be that, as some people are now saying, that now that we know that there is a serious problem at hand of attitudes, let's work on it. Let us try to let Pakistanis, Muslims know that, you know, disagreeing with others is our right, so long as we believe that the others are wrong. But there has to be a morality of disagreement. I think that's where we need to work a lot, and we need to teach our new generation. Unfortunately, right now, the kind of atmosphere that we have back home, people learn their religion from one group or another religious group. You know, I get the opportunity of talking about why many Muslims are extremists, and one of the answers that I give is that, quite apart from the arguments that they present, there is a serious problem with the environment in which religion is presented. That environment has certain features. You shall not listen to anybody else except what we are saying. You shall not ask any questions, or else you will be labeled as someone who has doubts. You shall follow this scholar blindly, and so on and so forth. I mean, imagine what else will happen except for the fact that one group of Muslims will be emotionally attached to one point of view, another group of Muslims would be emotionally attached to another point of view, and the two are disagreeing with each other in many areas. No dialogue, no discussion, no open-minded understanding of the other point of view is happening. And that is a serious problem, not just because it causes unrest, violence in my country, in our society, but probably even more significantly, it's a problem because this is exactly what our religion wants us not to do. I mean, I keep asking people, I mean, why is it that we are serious about religion? Why are we interested in religion? If we are interested in religion for any reason other than the fact that we want to know the truth, then I keep telling people that better play cricket or gulli danda. Don't come to religion. Because religion has got to do with truth. If you are not interested in truth and you are a religious person, better review your approach. So, you know, sadly, that is an attitude which really is there. I am not saying that Ahmadis have not done anything wrong, quite apart from their incorrect understanding, which I am absolutely convinced is incorrect. I think there have been problems of attitude in them as well. However, that doesn't really mean that if a minority has shown some problems in their attitude, that we become unfair and harsh. You know, we as a majority should be accommodating, and I think we should preach to their younger generation at least in a manner that they come to realize that their view is incorrect.
Thank you.
If you can just add one or two sentences
Please.
on the same point.
Please.
The problem with Qadianis begins when the Ahmadis call the non-Ahmadis kafirs.
Yeah, that's what I said. Their attitude is wrong. Absolutely.
And so in reciprocation, the non-Ahmadis obviously call them
No.
kafir.
And it's very difficult to expect from an ordinary common Muslim to be so magnanimous that no matter what they say, you know, we are going to welcome you. But honestly, we should go for the ideal, because what they believe in and what they do is wrong. But then obviously that doesn't really mean that we be unfair.
Do you believe it's correct that we can call the Qadianis kafir or not?
You see, my understanding, humble understanding, is that the word kafir is not to be used for anyone. It is a word, it is an expression that has been used in the Quran for those who rejected the truth knowingly. And I want to clarify to all Muslims that this word has been used in the Quran for some so-called Muslims as well. So it's not an expression which is actually used to distinguish Muslims from non-Muslims. The correct word for those who are not Muslims is non-Muslims. So, you see, Ahmadis have a view which is very different from our understanding with regard to prophets, God's wahi, and its scheme. Muslims of the subcontinent, more particularly of Pakistan, as a consequence of a series of events, they ultimately decided through their parliament that they are not going to be considered Muslims anymore. It's only a state, a parliament that can take such a decision. In the view of some people, they too cannot take any such decision. If somebody declares himself to be a Muslim, all that you need to do is to correct his understanding. and leave the question of whether the person is a Muslim or not to God to decide. However, what I believe is that if by the majority, in actual fact in that parliament, by the consensus of parliamentarians, they have taken a decision, now it's a law in our country, and that law obviously has to be followed. If some people are not looking at the law as an acceptable decision, well, they should be allowed the liberty and freedom to express themselves. That is what the biggest problem in my society is. Freedom is not available. If somebody would speak out against that law, he's going to be taken to task. Probably he's going to be removed from his existence. So,
sorry, if you don't mind,
yeah.
if I can just add one point to that. So, just to clarify what you're saying, really is it's not permissible for us to even call the Jews and the Christians the word kafir. We can call them non-Muslim, but not kafir.
Yeah.
You were just talking about the issue of the people who obviously in our time it's the Mirzais who say that they have another prophet after the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, a Nabi, as we classify. In the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if my historical information is correct, there was a man called Musaylima, and he claimed himself to be the messenger of Allah. And my understanding is the way the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Prophet of Islam, dealt with him was quite harshly. So how would you make an analogy, or would you like to give us the analogy of how we can deal with the Mirzai or Qadianis in our time when the Prophet ﷺ specifically dealt with them in a specific way?
Okay. I think there was a reason why I started the presentation with a prelude. Now, your question I will only be able to answer by referring back to it. The Quran is God's text, and the Sunnah are the practices which are like the Quran, fully preserved. Everything else is a historical record, and the historical record of the Prophet is very important. However, it needs to be understood in the light of the Quran and Sunnah. Now, in the Quran, there is a law that has been mentioned over and over again. Honestly, if you ask me what is the most predominant theme in the Quran, or one of the most predominant themes, it's going to be the one that I'm now going to describe, which you find everywhere in the Quran. And that theme is the description of the Almighty's law of Risala. Okay, you can describe it differently in different expressions, but it is the manner the Almighty dealt with the nations who received messages from messengers. Now, when I say messenger, I'm translating a Rasul, whose plural is Rusul. From the Quran, we learn that there have been men whom the Almighty had selected for the purpose of delivering His message to the mankind. They were called Nabi, whose plural is Anbiya. From amongst the Anbiya, there were a few who were given the status of Rasul. These were the Anbiya. The Rasul were the Anbiya, who, when they would visit a nation with God's message, they would come with a clear mandate that accept this message and succeed not only in the hereafter, but in this worldly life as well. Reject this message, and you're not just doomed in the next life, you're doomed here as well. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not just the last Nabi, he was the last Rasul as well. Therefore, like the nations of Nuh, Hud, Saleh, Shuaib, Lut, and Musa alayhimus salam were dealt with, and these 6 messengers that I've mentioned, their stories have been narrated in the Quran over and over again. Quite often people ask this question, why is it that the same story and theme is repeated again? Was it not enough for Nuh alayhi salam's story to have been mentioned in Surah Nuh and that's it? Well, the answer is that it was not just a story mentioned for the sake of it that was happening. The idea was that there was another nation that was about to be annihilated, punished by the Almighty through divine punishment because of them rejecting a messenger of God. So what happened was that the Almighty punished that nation. I asked many Muslims that they were also to be punished. Were they punished? And many of them say no. That's a tragedy. The Quran clarifies that the people of Mecca, the leaders of Quraysh and some others who rejected the messenger of God were likewise punished the way the earlier people were punished. And this is exactly what the Quran says. Akuffarukum khairum min ulaikum. Are your kuffar any better than the earlier ones? Am lakum bara'atun fi zubur. Or is it that they have got immunity in scriptures for them, that they are going to be spared? Not at all. So what happened? What happened was that after the Hijrah migration, the Quran tells us that whenever a messenger is forced to leave the town where he is propagating God's message, the nation becomes eligible for God's punishment. And that is exactly what Surah Bani Israel says. 2 years later, the first installment of God's punishment was inflicted upon the leaders of Quraysh, wherein in Battle of Badr, 70 leaders were killed. I keep saying that this battle is the only battle in the history of battles where all generals were killed and no ordinary soldier was killed. All of them were spared because this was God's punishment, and this is exactly what Surah Anfal says. Falam taqtuluhum, believers, you didn't kill them. Walakin Allah qatalahum. Instead, it was Allah who killed them. In Surah Tawbah, verse 14, the Almighty says, Yu'azzibhumullahu bi'aydikum. God is going to punish them through your hands. What I'm trying to say is that all the killings and punishments that happened during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ were actually the description, the practical details of this law. It has got nothing to do with the universal general principle of the Quran, which, by the way, says most clearly that you cannot kill anyone. There are only two reasons why you can kill another human. One, somebody has killed somebody else, and therefore after going through the process of investigation, there can be capital punishment given to that person, provided if the family doesn't agree to get blood money ransom. The other possibility is that somebody, an individual or a group of people, they indulge in what the Quran says, fasad fil ardh, mischief on earth, which again, if translated into practical examples, is either killing people, not just one murder, but serial killing. A person is a killer, or not committing theft, robbery. There are individuals who made it a profession, or not simple adultery, but rape or making this business. So these are the two exceptions which the Quran mentions. If somebody commits these crimes, that person is eligible to be killed. Apart from these two, if somebody kills another human, it is as if he has killed the entire humanity.
What if it was jihad though? It was declared jihad by a leader and they had to kill the enemy.
You see, the Quran doesn't contradict itself. The Quran, that is why, clarifies that the jihad that was undertaken by the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, and subsequently by his companions, it was a punishment of the Almighty which was inflicted upon those who rejected a messenger of God. And that's how you have the entire Quran presenting its case absolutely consistently. You know, when people say that we are going to kill others because they are non-Muslims, I keep telling them that kill them later. First, take care of your faith. Your Quran is appearing to be contradictory. It says you simply cannot kill because the other person has a different faith. The Quran tells us that there were people who got killed, they had to be killed because they rejected the messenger of God. Like people who rejected Nuh alayhi salam got killed. No other person can be killed for a different faith.
If you can maybe add a couple of sentences
Right.
that after the demise of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, because he was the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so wherever his message had reached, and they had rejected the message, knowing that fully that he is the true messenger of God, then they too had to be punished
Right.
by virtue of this law, and therefore the wars
They were right.
initiated.
And if you allow me, there is an expression, a term, itmamul hujja, which is what actually decides that a
The
certain
argument is completed.
right, the argument is completed, the message is presented so convincingly that there remains no room for doubt in the minds of others, and that declaration, understanding, clarification can only be had through God's wahi. Now nobody can decide that, you know, I have delivered a lecture and everybody has understood it and I've clarified it beyond doubt. Now I must shoot you. I can't do it because I must know my limitations, and it's only God who can decide that such and such person is eligible to be killed for not accepting his faith.
So are you saying that jihad doesn't exist no more?
No, that not. Jihad mentioned in the Quran. By the way, the sequence is in your hands, and hands should be raised. Jihad in the Quran, as it is mentioned, belongs to two categories. One was meant to implement the Almighty's decision of punishing those who reject the message of the messengers. The other for taking care of fasad fil ardh. If there is fitna, which according to the description of the Quran is you are causing people to be harmed simply because of their faith, religious persecution, if it's happening anywhere, then a Muslim ruler can declare jihad and his people would follow him, provided if they have a minimum requisite military strength. But here again, the Quran is absolutely consistent, because in that principal statement the Quran mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, there are only two exceptions. Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil ardh. It has either got to be a killer or somebody who is causing mischief on earth. You see, that is why I keep telling Muslims that look here, before taking any action, before undertaking jihad, first, for God's sake, understand what it is. What you are doing is causing lots of harm, but one harm it is causing is that it is making your text appear contradictory. The Quran does not allow you to kill. Sir, the Quran does not even allow you to kill an animal without mentioning God's name. If you will kill it, it's not going to be halal for you. So killing an individual is a huge crime, and for that the Almighty has clarified there are two exceptions. Or you're talking about killings which God clarifies you didn't kill, God killed them. So falam taqtuluhum, in Badr or Muslims you did not. You know why God had to say? Because God himself said that you can't kill. It's God who killed. And the Prophet ﷺ, he picked a few pebbles and threw at them, and the Quran says, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى.
Sorry, I have another question there. The curriculum taught in the madrasas throughout subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, was set several years ago during the period of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, as I understand. It's called Dars-e-Nizami. And even now, same syllabus is taught after several hundred years ago. Do you think that syllabus is fit for the purpose for today's world?
I think any syllabus which has not been reviewed after 10 years of it being taught becomes obsolete, whether it's religious or whether it's secular. I think I would not object to any religious presentation, because everybody has a right to present a religion the way he thinks is what it is. However, if there is in the environment a policy of not revisiting it, not allowing others to criticize it, then we have a serious trouble at hand. So yes, it's something which really should be reviewed. And honestly, it's a crime. It's a crime that you don't allow your students to question, to disagree, to critically examine. I mean, you know why it's a crime, I believe? It's because you know what is at stake? At stake is the truth. I am right now making an attempt to present before you God's message. I mean, who am I? I have no right. I have a few views. The only moral justification that I have in presenting it is that I declare that, it can be wrong. And if you will correct me, I'll think about it. But if I come with a stubborn mind that I have come with a message which is the ultimately correct message from God, oh my goodness, this is a serious matter. Because, I mean, nobody can make that statement except God's prophets. They are the ones who have got the message from the Almighty, and they are absolutely sure. Rest of us, we are only very ordinary, humble students of His message. And we should present the message with the arguments of the message and very humbly.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Saqib, and I am from Oxford. Thank you very much for coming here and enlightening all of us with your views.
Yeah.
Very quick, I've got two very small questions and one proposal. The question is that, sir, there is a law for the corporate circle that in order to preserve and safeguard a copyright, there are certain laws. And if I breach, say, if I start tomorrow Mawrid UK, the first thing I'll get is a notice from your side that, might be careful. You need to make sure that this logo, this name belongs to us. So if you're not following our principles and term conditions, we take you to the court. So similarly, there's a cult, which I call it, called Qadianis. They have breached the law, they have breached the copyrights, and they have tried to overwhelm the identity of Muslims by perceiving themselves as the true and the only Muslim group in the world. So we need to draw a line. So in contrast,
very briefly, my comments on some of the points that I still remember. When you've got a number of points that you raise, you don't have all them listed in your mind. This strategy of munazara, it helps and it doesn't. So I don't say that it's an idea that I would completely reject. It can help in some ways, but I am more in favor of a policy strategy wherein we approach their individuals and talk to them. When you challenge a community en masse, there is a kind of resistance that is erected, and they become defensive, and they do not allow their individuals to then interact with others. I am worried about those good Ahmadis who are there because they were born there, who are there because Ahmadis look after each other very well. And I really want to approach them. A strategy of open animosity probably is not going to be helpful, but we can have different opinions. As regards Ghamdi Saab's views, did you not notice that I have actually mentioned a slightly different understanding than what he mentions? At Al-Mawrid, we have this freedom. Ghamdi Saab's views are always scrutinized by students, ordinary people like me as well. He believes in what he says always because of reasons. Those reasons may not necessarily be accepted by everybody. At times we don't accept what he says. But I think what he says is that, if you look at the scenario objectively, honestly, there are many other groups as well who then would likewise be needed to be taken away from the community. But now I know that there is a history to it, and that history has caused the parliament to decide, and I do believe, and very humbly I am submitting, unlike my mentor, that a parliament can take that decision. Also, if Mirza Ghulam Ahmad did something wrong by declaring all non-Ahmadis as kafir, we should not do likewise. I think, that is what I said in my beginning statement. We as Muslims have a responsibility of presenting God's message in the right manner. We're not reactionaries. We're not people who would react to what somebody has done, and because somebody has done something wrong, we will make him learn a lesson. No, I think we should, even if somebody has done something wrong, some wrong to us, we should behave in a decent manner, which is what our religion has required. Because again, I say, honestly, I am concerned and worried about the good people who belong to that community, and there most certainly are good people. You would say that a strategy of open debate would help. I don't know. I've got my own reservations. There is no line. There is no line. Had there been a line, it would have been mentioned. Somebody says that I am a Muslim, we say, okay, but your views are flawed. Otherwise, I can tell you that there are many other communities as well who probably have very serious problems. There are people who approach God through non-God deities, through saints. We tolerate it. We invite them. We help them understand. We don't chuck them out of our community. I think if you ask me, ideally, we should never do it. We should continue to approach others with arguments and let God decide them. Whenever you become harsh in your approach, you are doing it at the expense of the environment, which should always be conducive for dawah. That's what my understanding is.
So can I just add
Please.
one sentence here, please?
Vote to declare them a non-Muslim in the parliament. Okay, so there are a number of restrictions put on them. What has happened due to that? That they have come to the British Council and the other countries. They are the two communities. One is the Qadianis in Pakistan. One is the Sikh community in Afghanistan, that they can ask asylum in this country and they get it accepted straight away without a minimum possible question. So what has happened over the times, that most of the people are coming up here without any problem, because Pakistan community or the authorities are persecuting them. So what I'm saying that should we go on the open debate on them and give them more publicity, so the more people will be able to come over here.
Sarwar Sahab has a very, very valid point. It's a valid point. You see, not just asylum. Asylum getting more freely available to them probably is a smaller matter. Even more important is the kind of image that you create in the eyes of the world at large. It probably is not desirable. So there are quite a few factors. And my understanding is that unlike my teacher, my mentor, that a Muslim parliament has a prerogative to take decisions in religious matters as well. However, it is not an absolute necessity, because if you think that it has become binding on the Pakistani parliament to declare whoever is not a Muslim, and we have a clear line, my goodness, I can tell you those lines have already been drawn by many people. And those lines would actually mean that except for them, a tiny minority of them, everybody else would be chucked out. So I think please let's not go towards that possibility.
Do we have the responsibility of just inzar now, or are we inheriting from Prophet the Risala as well? Can you clarify that?
The possibility of a nation or an individual getting killed through our hands because of them not agreeing with our message is over. We will just now, after the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, left this world, we will propagate, we will preach. If we get a land to rule over, we will present a model which will attract people, but we cannot kill anybody because of his or her faith.
Could I just add a caveat to that? So effectively what you're saying is that the Abbasid Khilafat, the Uthmani Khilafat, all what they did then, by understanding that there were certain exceptions where people were not permitting the free preaching of Islam, that they could attack them and fight them, you believe that was completely wrong? They misunderstood what Islam was saying.
No, this was very correctly responded to by Shamshad Saab, that you see, don't forget that the companions were an extension of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. They were living in the very times when this inzar, this itmam hujjah had happened. So no, they understood things much better than us. But please, when we talk about a religion, you know, we don't make statements like these, because when we get emotional, we do it at the expense of understanding. The Quran is absolutely clear and fully preserved by God. The Sunnah is absolutely authentically preserved by the Almighty. The rest is history which must be understood in the light of the Quran and Sunnah. So, you know, when we make statements like the one you've made, what it does is that we bring forth a few incidents that have been reported in history, written by one man who reported it from somebody else, and we want it to override everything that is written in the Quran. That's a great danger. That is what has happened, unfortunately, in the case of many Muslim groups, that they start mentioning incidents, imagine, reported by individuals, and here is the Quran fully preserved by the Almighty. So, you know, a safer way is to understand all those incidents in the light of what the Quran is saying.
Controversial subjects. In Quran, in Pakistan, there are many incidents where someone accused someone of doing hurmati of Quran, where someone burned the Quran and sort of blasphemy, and the mob will just go and kill that person. My question is, what right they have against someone without the due process of law? Even if they are hurmati, they are still liable to defend themselves in the court of law, and once the case is proved against them, then whatever sentence they deserve, they should get, but not the mob rule. And secondly, if burning a Quran is a serious crime, I personally have extreme respect for Quran as a book, as a paper, as a book. But for me, more important is what's written on that, in that book, on that paper. So if the criteria for killing someone is because he burned the Quran, I think we should all be liable to be killed, because every day we break the rules what Quran told us.
I think what you have mentioned is something which all important, responsible religious leaders accept. That is, that nobody can be allowed to take the law into his hands. This is something everybody agrees to. However, despite this agreement, there are frequent violations of this understanding and this rule. But honestly, I think it's important that the Quran, and in the light of the Quran, what we understand in Hadith, does not mention any punishment for blasphemy. That doesn't really mean that you cannot have a law that would punish those who blaspheme, but it cannot be capital punishment. Let me clarify, the same law of Risala that I mentioned explains why some people got killed, apparently for their blasphemous ways, expressions. Otherwise, there are mentions in the Quran, not just in the Meccan surahs, but in the Medinan surahs as well, which were revealed at the time when the Prophet ﷺ was at the helm of the affairs, that there were people who committed blasphemy, both non-Muslims and apparent so-called Muslims, hypocrites. And the Quran is completely devoid, free of any statement that says go and kill them. So I think we need to again realize that I have a duty towards non-Muslims to convey to them God's message. A non-Muslim is as yet not a believer. He has a right to ask questions. He has a right to criticize my ideology. It is my responsibility that I should respond to him politely, wisely, and convincingly. So if a Muslim country wants to have a law, they can have a law, but they cannot go ahead to actually to declare that somebody who is found guilty of some blasphemous act, the person is going to be killed, because that would really mean that we will start creating an environment where people would say, let's not talk about religion. Let's not even involve ourselves in anything that has to do with religion. It would be a huge loss. That's what my understanding is.
Could I just add, if you don't mind, just to that point that you added, you know, if the state decides that they want to have a law which they believe if anybody does commit blasphemy, that in their opinion committing blasphemy is like treason, and they do want to have the death penalty, do you not agree that it is the right of the state, if they've gone through their own parliamentary system, to adopt that, and you have no right in saying that it's wrong in the absolute sense? You may disagree with it, but they have the right to implement that law. Just like in many countries in the world, there is a death sentence for treason.
You see, when you say that if a country has a law and you would accept it, what you mean is that you can't stop the country from implementing its law. And then there is a process which is there in place to undo it. And the process is to have debate and discussion. There are laws in some countries, many countries, probably all countries, which we will disagree with. However, we cannot go ahead and cause chaos in the society and a situation of law and order because we disagree with a few laws. What we will do is that we will resort to the process that is available to us to let people know and to attract the attention of the masses, of the majority, to the understanding that this law is wrong, so that it needs to be corrected. That's the process that we must follow.
So, slightly moving away from the topic and maybe concentrating more on the pragmatic side of things. The Quran has declared the manner, the character, the example of the Prophet ﷺ, the best example. And there is a verse, and I can't quote the verse, but I'll talk about Mafhum, in which it says, Allah says to Prophet Muhammad that if you were harsh in your heart, these people around you, they would have run away from you. So do you feel that we have kind of lost that ability that Prophet had, or we did not really pay attention towards it?
فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It is God's mercy that you are kind, soft, and lenient towards them. Had you been harsh and hard, they would have withered away. That's right, absolutely. If you are involved in the process of spreading across God's message, you simply cannot afford to be harsh. You simply cannot afford to have a behavior which causes people to fear you, to fear your statements, your attitude. And that is the glorious example of the Prophet ﷺ, which we must always understand, and I agree with you, and try to emulate. You see, the sad thing is that many of these people were completely ignorant of what the true message of Islam and what the true example of the Prophet is. They have been given to learn about a few incidents which have got to do with the law of Risala, which is actually not what the Prophet did himself. He was asked, allow me to say, he was forced by God to do that. The Quran says, for example, Ya ayyuhan nabi, Jahidil kuffara wal munafiqeen waghluz alayhim. O Prophet, you do jihad and fight against these kuffar and hypocrites and be strong against them. Why? Because he was not. He was polite, he was kind, he was forgiving. But then there came a time which was kind of deadline beyond which they were not eligible to his softness and kindness anymore, because the Almighty's punishment was to be inflicted upon them. So unfortunately, those incidents are highlighted, and unfortunately Muslims are not explaining that these have got nothing to do with the normal, common, real behavior of the Prophet. It has got to do with a law that has to do with divine punishment. That's what we must clarify to the entire humanity, and we should clear the great, glorious name of the Prophet from all these allegations, which unfortunately are part of the understanding of some people, who then go on to do things which then, cause us to be pained and maybe react to them.
Also, the misunderstanding of the
and you can answer later then.
whereby if you see anything wrong,
Right.
So that I think if you can elaborate.
Okay,
Sir, last question.
I'll do it after the break.
After that, we will have a break.
Right.
And inshallah.
If you can just add one sentence, because
Okay.
this is
Okay,
very,
sir.
very
Okay.
relevant.
Complete the sentence and then one question.
You see, the famous hadith that whoever sees an evil, he should change it with his hands. If that is not possible, then with his tongue, and if that too is not possible, then he should condemn it in his heart, and that is the weakest part of faith. That has got completely to do with a person who is in authority, and therefore has a right to come up with his authority and ability to decide. The Prophet ﷺ, in the 13 years of his stay in Mecca, after declaration of his prophethood, he prayed in the Holy Kaaba every day, where there were 360 idols that were worshipped. Never ever did he touch any of them. But when he returned 8 years later as a conqueror, he cleansed the Kaaba of those idols, because now he was at the helm of the affairs. So the idea is that if you see something wrong, evil, and you are the principal, headmaster, the father, or whatever, and you've got the authority, then use your authority. Not everybody. I cannot go to a neighbor's home and say that I don't like your wife's dress and I want to use my hand. Obviously, he's going to give you a good treatment and you'll deserve it. So it is a contextual statement.
So you could just following on straight from that, you said that wasn't the way of the Prophet ﷺ. But if you look at the story of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, who we believe we have inherited the Sunnah from, when he was confronted with the idols, he actually went and smashed all of the idols up, and then got the stick and put it on one of the idols. And when they asked him who smashed the idols, he said, "Ask him." So the thing is, sometimes this confrontational approach is also usable, is it not?
Well, in my humble understanding, again, you see, when we have two incidents or two statements which are apparently contradictory, instead of coming up with an understanding which is more tilted towards the one which is more harsh, let's resolve the contradiction. Let's first do our academic work before bringing these things out. My ordinary understanding is that act of Ibrahim alayhi salam was a way to enable those people to know the contradiction in their approach. He highlighted the fact that they are doing something which is absolutely unacceptable, and it was done in that manner. The Quran clarifies that this was hujjatuna atainaha Ibrahim. It was God's hujjat, the way to deal with a nation that was otherwise not prepared to listen to anything. But it was not a general policy. It was only a strategy adopted in a particular occasion for the people to realize that the kind of things that they are doing are absolutely unacceptable intellectually and morally.
Thank you, sir.
So my question is, how do you, in your, in your research, how do you come across the subject of Wahi when the Nabiyyin were, they had the communication, the initial and the later on communication with Allah Ta'ala? they were given specific tasks as if to go out and speak and spread the message. And they were the sole, if you would call it, message bearers. And their job was to translate and further give the message across. How do you see that whole process, one? And the second is, of course, everybody was different. Nabis had their own reasons, they had their oin fears. If I'd say this, my talaffuz is not right, my language is not right, what if they don't listen, this and that. Allah Ta'ala gave them the conviction to carry on and actually deliver that message. How much, again, I'm kind of relating to my last question, the communication methods of those times depended on how far the message spread?
You see, when we say that we believe in prophets as humans who were selected by God for them to be guided by Him, and for them to deliver the message to the rest of the mankind, what we are saying is that God communicated with them directly. Now, when He communicated with them, the method of communication we know were different. There were a number of possibilities. But one thing is clear, that the Almighty, in order for His task of delivering the message to the mankind, He treated and dealt with the prophets according to a policy which was consistent. However, in the case of each individual, there were certain peculiarities, like what you mentioned about Musa alayhi salam. He had a difficulty in speech, and then the Almighty enabled him to overcome it. Likewise, as I mentioned, in the case of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he confronted a nation who were particularly stubborn and completely uninclined in understanding and listening to somebody else's views. So he had to resort to certain tactics, certain ways, which would force them to think.
Mu'jiza is being one of them?
Mu'jiza is another aspect. Okay, yeah. That is also obviously related to the times, the peculiar circumstances. I mean, Jesus Christ was born to a virgin, and His birth caused Maryam alayhi salam to face serious challenges in the society. So the Almighty arranged for Isa alayhi salam to speak right after his birth. So this was something that was needed.
Yes.
So likewise in the case of Musa alayhi salam and everybody else, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for him the Quran was enough, because of the fact that the kind of language it had and the kind of presentation it made, it really had such a deep, strong impact on all people who wanted to know the truth, because they knew that here is somebody we know as somebody who is absolutely truthful and reliable, but we know that he had no interest in poetry or any such thing. And all of a sudden he's coming up with a message which is otherwise also very effective from the point of view of moral and religious presentation, and also from the point of view of its linguistics, the kind of impact the language had on the people. It was out of this world. So that was the miracle of the Prophet.
Quickly, so am I okay in thinking? Sorry, yes, just this was. Am I okay in thinking this? That according to, depending on the times that we're talking in particular about, the ease and availability of communication, the more it was there. For example, in Musa's time, we all know they had enough knowledge to write something on the wall. Somebody else would read it, and then you would be able to kind of get the information. So that's me transferring some information in some way to another individual. Do you think that in Hazur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time, the fact that it was in Arab and the way the language was so big and diverse had a lot to do with the way Islam spread so quickly?
Islam spread quickly at the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, primarily because of the fact that his prophetic mission towards the end part of it attracted a large number of companions, and because of the Almighty's decision that this message is going to be made to be supreme, and all other ideologies would wither away, would disappear. That was a part of God's promise, because he was Rasulullah, God's messenger. And when God messengers come, Ja al-haq wa zahaq al-batil. Truth dominates and batil disappears. In many cases, because batil was dominant, it was destroyed by punishments, natural calamities in one form or the other. In the case of the last prophet, the batil was restricted, confined, and it was eliminated, and haq dominated. So that's what happened.
Very quick question
so,
proposal. You can answer later if you like.
It was the last question, but the brother said, I don't know what it means, but let him ask the question.
A very quick proposal. You can answer after the namaz, inshallah. A quick question.
Depends on whether I know the answer or not.
A quick proposal and a quick question is that, mashallah, Ghamdi Sahib is a very pro-democrat. He has been very much advocating that the democracy is the right model in relation to the Khilafah and other models. So why not Al-Mawrid step into the Pakistani politics? Because the reason the extremist side of the ulama, they gain power is when they gain access to the parliament. They get 10-15 seats, and then they can manipulate. They can have, they become proxies. So when you say that democracy is a model, so why not Al-Mawrid step into Pakistani politics so they can become the decision maker or part of the decision making? A proposal. A quick question is that you said that the evolution Islam is an evolving and a modern and a pragmatic way of life and a religion. Can you please explain any of the 5 points which Ghamdi Sahib proclaimed or announced or practiced, but he changed afterwards, with your opinion or by anyone else's opinions? Over the times.
Can I request?
He explain those 5 points?
Can I request? This question is going to be long when it's
After the
And I'll have to think about it as well.
Can I
Yeah.
just request one thing that because we obviously for a long it's the first time we've actually met you. Can you just after the break session give a bios of yourself, just a brief
Yes, I
introduction
think
of what you are, who you studied, and then so we understand a bit
basically,
more
I think that's because lots of friends are here now, and inshallah, when we start, we'll give a brief. Reza will introduce Dr. Khalid Zaheer. We'll go
So we go for the press, okay.
The mosque.
why is Sheikh Ghamdi in Indonesia or Malaysia? Why is he in Pakistan like a lot of the other Islamic groups?
We can explain that. He has a life threat, which was, I think, very last minute. You've been told that you have to exit, otherwise you will be, you've been killed. So that's why he has to exit. He stays out of Pakistan for a few months, and then he permanently going to.
Actually, his life was in danger for many years before he left the country. He insisted that I am not going to leave the country. He was forced to have some kind of a security which he had to give in to the demand. But the reason why he was forced to leave the country immediately was that there was a group of people who were about to blow up his house, which he was concerned that if that's the kind of threat that he is going through, then it's not only his own life, but the life of his family and his neighbors are also at stake. And he said that that's something which is morally not acceptable. And he does mention one incident. He said, on one occasion I was coming out of the masjid after saying a prayer, and one of his neighbors came and he requested, beseeched that he should not come to the masjid, because in that case their lives are also going to be in danger. So he said that it was then that he realized that it's probably not correct on his part to be living with people who think that their lives are in danger because of him.
Do you feel threatened since you're also the follower?
I also had to come to this country for 2 years because of the same reasons. This was 2012 and 2013. I came and I went back, as long as my visa allowed me to stay. So yes, there was a time when I also had the same kind of, well, not exactly at the same level and scale, but there were threats.
Are you
देखिए मैं چند باتیں اختصار کے ساتھ بیان کر رہا ہوں. اختصار اس لیے کہ ہمارے پاس وقت کم ہے. میں یہ بھی گزارش کروں کہ میں انگریزی میں اس لیے بول رہا تھا، یہ میرا ایک سوچا سمجھا ایک انڈرسٹینڈنگ ہے کہ اگر آپ کسی مجلس میں ہوں جس میں تمام لوگ ایک زبان جانتے ہیں مگر ایک شخص وہ زبان نہیں جانتا، تو یہ اخلاقی طور پر ہی غلط ہے کہ آپ وہ زبان بولیں کہ جو کم سے کم ایک شخص تو نہیں جانتا، جبکہ اگر آپ وہ والی زبان بولیں جس کو کہ وہ شخص بھی جانتا ہے اور سب بھی جانتے ہیں تو یہ ٹھیک نہیں ہے. اور دوسرا یہ کہ ہمیں دین کو پہنچانا ہے تمام لوگوں تک. اس وجہ سے میرے بھی جبڑے تھک جاتے ہیں انگریزی بول بول کے، لیکن بہرحال یہ ایک مجبوری ہے. مگر آپ کے ساتھ یہ طے ہوا ہے جن لوگوں نے سوال اردو میں کرنا ہے ان کو اردو میں جواب دیا جائے گا. پہلی وضاحت یہ کرنی ضروری ہے کہ کسی کی سفارش کوئی نہیں کر سکتا. یہ قرآن میں 3 جگہ بیان ہوا ہے. لا یقبل منہا شفاعت. یہ کیسے لوگوں نے ایسا فیصلہ کر لیا کہ کوئی حافظ بنائے گا اپنے بیٹے کو تو اس کی سفارش ہوگی؟ یہ قرآن کے خلاف ہے. مختصر بات یہ ہے کہ سفارش جو قرآن سے ثابت ہے، جو حدیث میں بیان ہوئی ہے، وہ اسی وقت ہوگی جب آدمی اس لیول تک پہنچ جائے گا کہ جس میں وہ کم سے کم مارجنل کیس ہوگا. اگر وہ مارجنل کیس نہیں بنا تو کچھ نہیں ہو سکتا. یہ مسلمانوں کو بتانے کی ضرورت ہے. گزارش یہ بھی ہے کہ حفظ کا مطلب صرف الفاظ کو یاد کر لینا نہیں ہے، بلکہ اس کلام کے مفہوم کو سمجھنا ہے اور سمجھ کر اس پر عمل کرنے کے لیے بھی پوری کوشش کرنا ہے. ہمارے ہاں انفارچونیٹلی حفظ میں صرف ظاہری الفاظ کو میمورائز کرنا ہے. رہی اس کی اہمیت کی بات، میں اصولی طور پر آپ کی بات سے متفق ہوں. ظاہر ہے کہ ایک زمانے میں قرآن مجید کی حفاظت کے لیے حفظ کرنا در حقیقت خدا تعالیٰ کے پلان کا حصہ بننا تھا. ابھی بھی وہ بڑی اہم چیز ہے. بڑی پریولیج کی بات ہے کہ آپ رات کو اٹھتے ہیں، نمازوں میں آپ لمبا لمبا قرآن مجید کا حصہ پڑھتے ہیں. یہ اس کا کوئی مقابلہ نہیں ہے. تاہم اس میں کوئی شک نہیں کہ اب قرآن مجید کی حفاظت کے اور طریقے بھی اللہ تعالیٰ نے ایسے انٹروڈیوس کر لیے ہیں کہ جس کے بعد کم سے کم یہ تو بالکل نہیں ہونا چاہیے جو واقعات آپ بیان فرما رہے ہیں.
تھینک یو سر.
تھینک یو جی. ڈاکٹر صاحب, oh sorry, English. Right, okay, fine, thank you. Could you kindly explain us the current banking system and the current interest, whether it's a riba as it is mentioned in Quran, or is it a some different form?
Right, again obviously it's a question which deserves a very long answer, but I'll just give you my understanding very briefly. I was mentioning to a few friends before, while we were having lunch, that the Almighty has already given to us in our nature an understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Therefore, we know what is wrong in business. There are subjects with the title of business ethics taught in universities of the world without any reference to Bible or Quran. Why? Because we know that there is a morality which needs to be understood and followed in business matters. It's only in areas where there could have been disputes, where people could have gone wrong, gotten confused, where the Almighty gave His verdict, a few of them, and one of which is riba. What's wrong with riba? When you give somebody an amount for him to employ it in his business, and you bind him to return the full value of what you had given to him, plus an additional increment, knowing full well that after the amount is going to be invested, the business can actually fail. You know, there are hundreds of reasons why a business can go wrong without necessarily any fault of the person who is running the business. Now, if a person insists and binds the person who is borrowing that the amount, the value that he has given must get returned to him by all means, plus a definite increment, it is unacceptable. The Almighty says it's absolutely wrong. It's haram. However, what if a person says that you take my loan, my amount, invested in your business, if you make profits, please share a part of your profits with me. If you make losses, my principal will remain intact. I will not force you to give my principal back to me until such time that you are in a position to do so. We believe that this is not wrong and un-Islamic, which really means that the modern banking system, if it changes its policy of demanding from its borrowers a return of an amount which is more than the value of the principal amount, under all circumstances, then the banking system actually would be acceptable. The good news is that the banking system, Western banking system, is moving towards that direction. We now have policies and laws which require banks not to force people who are on the verge of defaulting because of extraneous reasons not within their control. I very strongly believe that we should inform bankers, conventional bankers, Western bankers, that this is something which the Almighty had already mentioned in the Quran, that this is not going to be allowed because it's unfair, because it's exploitation. There is another serious problem in the banking system which has not got to do with Sharia. It has got to do with morality, and that is the amount that is collected from people who are account holders, and it gets accumulated. In many cases, the banking system lends that amount to those who are already rich, which actually widens the rich-poor gap. But this is something which again needs to be emphasized, and people are already aware of it, and I think we need to have policies where banks should be fair in the distribution of the funds that they have with them at their disposal, and they should never ever demand anything from a person who is in a difficult situation, whose circumstances are straitened for reasons beyond his control. That is ensured, there are no problems.
So the answer to the question is, you're specifically talking about taking loans?
Yeah, loans, mortgages. Mortgages, we all work in business environment.
Mortgage is one product. When I'm talking about riba, riba has to do with a forced return of a loan of a commodity or a currency, which by nature is such that when it is used, it gets consumed, it disappears. When you are talking about a commodity, you're talking about an asset which when it's used, it stays intact. It doesn't exhaust, like table, like car, like house. When you demand anything extra for the use of it, you're not demanding riba, you're demanding a rent. Rent is allowed, it's only riba which is not allowed. And in mortgage, what you're doing is you are entering into a hire purchase agreement. The installment that you give, a part of it is towards rentals, hiring, and a part of it is towards the principal, purchasing. So it's a hire purchase agreement. In some cases, in details when you go there, there are some problems, but in principle, there's nothing wrong with hire purchasing. I think it's a very good idea. You enable many people who otherwise are not rich enough to own a house to be able to start living in the houses that they are ultimately going to become owners of, and they do actually become owners of it.
Thank you, sir. But the question is called interest. So is the word, I mean the current like mortgage we have to pay interest. So is that interest word riba?
I keep telling people that if you start calling sheep pig, sheep would not become pig. I think we should tell people that it's not interest, it is rentals.
Exactly, yeah. So that it's basically just the word.
Yeah, it's a use of wrong, incorrect use of a word, yeah.
There are a lot of problems in this country. I'm sure you're aware of Muslim gangs raping underage girls, and some nasty mind journalists and say the fact that Muslim does that because it's acceptable practice in their religion, their prophet practiced that himself, being married to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, being an underage girl. Could you tell us a bit more about the validity of her age, whether she was 9 or she was some other thing?
You see, one of the reasons why I mentioned right at the beginning, the basic principle on the basis of which I understand my religion. My religion, its information about it comes to me through 3 sources: Quran, Sunnah, Hadith. Quran is absolutely fully preserved. It's the ultimate criterion. Sunnah practices are fully preserved as well, but they are just practices. And Hadith is subservient to the Quran and Sunnah. It has to be read and understood in the light of the Quran and Sunnah. It's a footnote explanation of Quran and Sunnah. Whenever I will make opinion about something that has got to do with my Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, his companions, his wives, I will not take the risk of relying upon information that has come down to me from one or few individuals. I will look at the alternative possibilities. We know that with regard to the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, there are 2 opinions. One is that it was 6 or 9, and the other was it's 17, 18, or plus minus 1-2 years. I have good reasons to feel, quite apart from the fact that it makes more sense, that this piece of information is more reliable. One of the reasons why I think that it's more reliable is that it's mentioned that Asma radiallahu anha, the elder sister of Aisha radiallahu anha, she was 10 years older than Aisha, and she died at the age of 100, and she died in 72 Hijrah. Now, these pieces of information are more reliable because they happen much later. You know, the more you go in the past, deeper in the past, the more unreliable the information is. Why? Well, simply because of the fact that in the Meccan period, Prophet ﷺ and his companions were involved in many things which were not noticed, which were not observed by people to be transmitted to others. When he migrated to Medina, and in later times, because it became so very well known that he is the most important person the mankind would ever experience, information about him became more and more reliable. So in the later times, when we come to learn about the fact that Asma was 100 when she died in the year 72, which really means that at the time of Hijrah she was 28, 100 minus 72 is equal to 28, and therefore Aisha radiallahu anha at the time of Hijrah was 18. You know, when I've got 2 different points of view which are there for me to decide which of the 2 possible ages she must have had, well, I go for the one which makes more sense to me, and I would not put my understanding about this very important matter regarding the life of the Prophet at stake simply because it's mentioned in a book. Howsoever reliable it is, it's a book which was compiled by an individual. It is also said in criticism of that particular hadith that one of the ravis who is in the chain of narrators was a reliable ravi. However, his reliability was not established after he migrated to Kufa, because when he went there, he had entered the age when he started forgetting things. And it's mentioned about one of the ravis that is exactly what happened in the case. Having said all that, honestly, when I'll be given two different pieces of information about the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, because it's not there in the Quran, because it's come down to us both pieces of information which are not 100% certain, why would I accept the one which is creating so many problems?
Doctor, can I just add
Please,
something?
please.
I gave a talk on this subject.
MashaAllah.
And based on that, there is a booklet available. That talk is also available on YouTube, and that is called The True Age of Aisha at the Time of Marriage. The point I'm trying to make is that if you accept this 6 and 9 age from Bukhari, it contradicts other hadiths of Bukhari relating to her age.
Right.
So there's contradiction within
Excellent.
itself.
Excellent.
So, in fact, there are numerous other evidences.
So please let him know where those
YouTube,
booklets are. Okay.
YouTube, The True Age of Aisha at the Time of Marriage. And
It's
also
your
from
it's your presentation.
Yeah.
All right.
And also from IPCI booklet is
MashaAllah.
based on that.
MashaAllah.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Saab, as an economist, I would like to know your opinion. We heard that every state has, I came from Kashmir, I was born in Kashmir, studied in Pakistan, and we were told that there is a spiritual aura of every state which transfers around and it makes you known with your identities. With broken economies, like Pakistani state, can we have any aura in the world? Can we influence anybody?
No, I quite agree with you. Unless we are economically sound, we cannot have any impact on any other society. Well, not just that, our own people are not going to be able to function from a moral point of view properly, and obviously from a spiritual point of view. That having said, individuals will not be absolved from the obligation and responsibility of behaving in a morally upright manner. However, when it comes to the question of those who are running the affairs of the country and those who are worried about the general behavior of the masses, I think it's a very valid point. I worry about the fact that in my country, the rich-poor gap is so huge that I quite often think that, the people who are poor and they see these affluent people in their surroundings enjoying their lives of luxury, if they get indulged in some kind of vice because of their poverty, I hope the Almighty is going to be lenient to them in dealing with them. And most certainly, with this kind of disparity, you do have a greater propensity towards evil, towards crime, and breaking of laws. So while we are doing our task of inviting people towards the right path and towards morality, we should also tell those who are running the affairs of the country to make sure that its conditions improve and the economic level and the standard of living of the common man comes to a stage where a normal person would not be inclined to do what is wrong.
Thank you.
Dr. Saab, Quran quite emphatically mentions that it's a clear book in a clear language. Its verses are very clear and evident. But when we look at the verses in which shifa is mentioned, intercession is mentioned, while it says that no intercession will be allowed, but then it goes and makes this exception, says except whom Allah permits. In different ways it says that, and then that exception is then used as an opening by people to argue all sorts of things. So if Allah left that kind of ambiguity in those verses, can we really say that these are clear verses?
If the full presentation about shafa is given to people, so for example, I tell you what it is, you would say that I now understand it completely and it's absolutely clear. However, when people do not understand certain aspects of the Quranic presentation, it is no justification for them to jump to the conclusion that the understanding that they like, their fancy, is the one which is correct. Quran is a clear book. Doesn't really mean that it's a bland book, that it really has been written in a manner that even 5 years old boy can also understand. It's a book which is intrinsically clear. When it mentions something, it mentions it clearly, provided somebody is prepared and willing to understand it. The problem with the concepts like shafaat, which have gone wrong, is that people have not done what the Quran describes as tadabbur. When you read the Quran invites you to faith, but this journey to getting a higher level of faith is not challenge-free journey. It has its challenges. So what you find quite often, and I keep telling people, that once you start reflecting upon the Quranic verses seriously, you will find that to begin with, there are contradictions, apparent. But those apparent contradictions, like in the case of Shafaat, are an invitation to the reader to go more deeper, and therefore to be able to get a higher level of understanding and faith. Unfortunately, people don't meet this challenge properly. And what they do is that they come to the conclusions which are either popular in the surroundings, in the environment, or are somehow helping them in some worldly sense. But I ask you, the one who has asked this question, to take up any topic in the Quran, howsoever seemingly complicated, and go into the understanding of it more deeply and ask different scholars about their opinions. You will hopefully come to two conclusions if you do it properly, earnestly, and devote your time for it. Different scholars who are giving their own respective points of view, either only one of them is correct or none of them is correct, and they have not done their homework properly themselves. And B, the Quran has done enough to clarify its point in a manner that if it is read properly with an open mind, it clarifies its understanding beyond doubt.
Could I just add a caveat to that? The non-Muslims use another example like you've given. For example, they say that in one place the Quran says that Allah guides whom He pleases, and then in another place it says Allah guides only those who are sincere. So they go, that's a contradiction. Well, the thing is, it's like he said, if you combine all the evidences together, you find what it simply means is Allah decides to guide those whom are sincere in His guidance. So apparent contradictions, if you do research, then inshallah we'll always find the solution.
Inshallah.
Because Allah's promised this.
Yes.
Sorry, Doctor. I just got a more philosophical question for you. Quite recently I've been reflecting in myself about my own faith. And it's been quite a while right now. But what I realise about my faith, alhamdulillah, I do believe in God, and I hope everybody in this room does believe in God. But what I realised recently is what I'm worried about recently is what is my type of faith. So I'm worried that my faith is more of a hopeful faith rather than a faithful faith per se, right? What I mean by that is I hope to believe in God. I don't really hope to believe in God. I'm worried that I believe in God rather than I believe in God unequivocally. I just wanted to see.
I think it's a very good position. I think it's a very natural position. I think that's how we all go through the journey of faith. Nobody is born with 100% faith of certainty in God. The Almighty says in the Quran, Allahu waliyul lazina amanu yukhrijuhum minaz zulumati ilan nur. God Almighty becomes the protecting friend of those who believe, who want to believe, who are inclined to believe. He brings them out from the darkness of misguidance towards the light of faith. So what you are going through is, I tell you, the only path. And those who are claiming that they are 100% certain don't even know what they're saying. So we move from lesser faith to a higher degree of faith, and it also fluctuates depending upon your state of understanding and your behavior attitude. So don't worry, young man, you are on the right track, alhamdulillah.
And sir, the question is, as my young brother, or his age of my son, the question he raised, we are in a stage where we have learned from many prospects. You know, we spend our ages, we are, you know, in 40s, 50s, 60s. The young generation, either in Pakistan or here or wherever they are, the Muslim or non-Muslims, they have these questions. What the best possible way to address those questions, and how can we, you know, lead them in this situation?
You know, this young man, when he asked me this question, I was not surprised and I was not upset. The only thing that disappointed me was his initial attitude. When he said, you know, I believe so, you know, don't think that I am not a believer. You see, we should give space to people. Let them disagree. Let them say that I don't believe. We'll help them. Why was he scared? Why did he have to say this? You know, it's very disappointing that in United Kingdom, Birmingham, a young man is saying that, please, you know, brothers, I believe. That's what the problem is. That is what breeds hypocrisy. You want to create a generation who tells you when you are there right in front of them that I am a believer, even though they don't have it. Faith is not something that you can thrust upon people, you know, down their throats. It's something you get gradually. It's something you get as a consequence of their questions getting answered. And faith, young man, is what you would actually get in your experiences. When after having given the question of faith a thought, and after having read the Quran, you will experience God in your life, and inshallah your faith will grow. So don't discourage them ever. Let them ask questions, let them disagree, let them make statements sometimes which are unconventional. Inshallah, at the end of the day, they'll come to faith. Our faith, our book is strong enough to take care of all these differences, all these problems.
Just 2 sentences.